Centuries past and still the same.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, my personal channel. This is the personal channel of A.W. Finnegan, author of The Sleeper Agent, The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. What I have for you today is a video on the German Insel Riems, the facility that was used. It was an agricultural facility on the northernmost tip of Germany, East Germany. It was an isolated island, much like Plum Island, down by Connecticut. And that, of course, Plum Island was structured after Erich Traub's description of that German facility, Insel Riems, the one that he was vice president at from 1942 to 1948. So in this video, that's what we're going to discuss. On a side note, I should have the Courtney Turner interview that I did with her a few days ago. That will be up under my appearances / interviews page, or interviews and appearances section. That is updated that will be updated regularly as I appear on different shows. Of course, I've got all my appearances up to now, which haven't been a whole lot, but there'll be plenty of more to come. They're on that page. A lot of them aren't on YouTube, so I embed the code for the videos of whatever platform they are. Mostly, I think, Rumble and Odyssey. And so I will have the Courtney Turner interview up when I get it. We had a good discussion. It was fun. I enjoyed that interview. And I'm definitely looking forward to many more interviews, and I probably will be a guest on her show again. And I know I'm looking. I think there's one coming up called, I believe it's called Sheep Farm, and it's by two guys from the UK. So I'll be doing that in March, early March. And I can't remember. I don't think I have anything else besides that lined up, but I will be getting them. This book should be getting like international fame for all the stuff that I discovered. I'm not saying that to lionize myself. Like, just the substance itself, what I've discovered is of such immense importance that if you ask somebody what they thought, they would say, "Oh yeah, that person should be international fame." I know, like, my aunt, for example, had read my book and thought that I should be like all over the news for what I discovered. Well, I was like, yeah, well, in these times, in these days, I don't know if I'd want to be on the news. Mainstream media, I don't know. I think what they would do is probably just try to crucify me as a conspiracy theorist, even though, this whole book is backed up by solid evidence, definitely, and cannot be classified as conspiracy theory. But that's always a term used anytime there's some inconvenience that comes up and they want to discredit someone. That's always the argument they use. You're a conspiracy theorist. It's ridicule. They can't actually debate the argument, so they have to resort to name calling. But that's okay. If I get publicly crucified, I'll take it as a badge of honor. But back to this. So, I had, like, a few years back, I had produced on Photoshop this, like, I don't know, 20-page dossier, right, that was all the people in Germany, like the German bioweaponeers. Like, there's his Erich Traub's mentor, Carl Beller, and I had been advising a group of filmmakers. There was a film company and a screenwriter, two girls who became my good friends, Jody Savin and Crystal Bennett, and I was advising them. We were kind of working in each other's benefit. I was writing my book, they were making their film, and we also were consulting with John Loftus, so it was like the four of us just going back and forth with emails and stuff, and they were very helpful for me. They helped me get a lot of the research papers that I had to buy from the German universities while I was writing my book, and so they were able to get me, like the embezzlement investigation by Erich Traub from the German archives. I was able to get some documents from the American archives, British archives, and so in the course of writing my book, I ended up producing this dossier, a PDF document, and was able to kind of help them to see all of the important people from the German bioweapons program. And maybe I'll make it available for download or something, but it was really cool. I almost wish I had included it in the book. But back to this. So, Insel Riems, this facility, as some have termed it, the Isle of Riems, or Isle of Riems. So, Insel Riems was formed, or the facility was first put into use in the early 1900s after Robert Frosch and Frederick Lafleur were hired by the German government to find the cause of foot and mouth disease, which was a virus. They couldn't find a bacteria, and foot and mouth disease virus was actually one of the first viruses discovered, or one of the first viruses that initiated virus research. And using what are called filters, or candle filters, or there were these filters that they could run fluids through, and these things would hold back the bacteria in the filters. But then what would pass through are the viruses, and material that were far smaller than bacteria would pass through them. And that's how they arrived at virus research. And it was called, back then, viruses were often termed filterable viruses instead of just viruses. Sorry. So they were termed filterable viruses. And I am well aware of how pervasive the argument that there's no such things as viruses now has become. I wholeheartedly reject that, and I think it was just something, I think it was a complete psyop, and I think a lot of people fell for it, and I think that the decision was made based on an emotional thing. I think people were just mad about the lockdowns and about the whole COVID situation, so they decided, well, viruses don't exist anymore because we don't like them. And I think that's essentially what happened. I can put together a very solid argument for the existence of viruses that are, more than proven. More than proven. And I think if people took a look at it, they would see that, yeah, okay, you're right. And I'm actually working with somebody on producing something to that effect. But, I haven't covered it. I haven't really even touched upon it. I didn't even say anything about that in my book because I just think it's a complete diversion. But I will, at some point, if people are interested, I will go over, you know, my stance. I know I've covered it in previous articles. But of course, in the early days, this is how they realized that viruses exist. They ran them through filters. These filters would hold back bacteria and microbes, but anything much smaller would pass through it. And that's how they arrived at virus research. And so Insel Riems was initiated because of foot and mouth disease. And in the process of trying to research foot and mouth disease, these two people, they were having trouble with it. They were having trouble working with it on the mainland because it would give rise to new outbreaks in the process of trying to research it. So what they did was they forced it to a very remote area, an island, much like how Plum Island is kind of on an isolated island, or the Plum Island facility is located on an isolated island. Well, the same was true for Insel Riems, and it was under the authority of the University of Greifswald. Greifswald is a section of Germany. It is like the northernmost tip of East Germany. And to get out to Insel Riems, they had to take this, this cable car or a train or something that would go over water, how is it? You have like ski lifts, right? Something like that, but it was a much bigger car, and that's how they would get back and forth from the mainland to Insel Riems. I will show throughout this video many pictures of the Insel Riems facility. And so its first president was a guy named Otto Waldmann. It looks like Waldman, but in German they say the W's like V's. So his name was Otto Waldmann. And Otto Waldmann sat as president of Insel Riems. And he was not as involved in the research as was his vice president, who was Erich Traub. Erich Traub sat as vice president of Insel Riems from 1942 to 1948, and he basically directed the entire phase of research. Otto Waldmann was more kind of like a bureaucrat from Insel Riems, and he would often be traveling elsewhere, traveling to different areas. He just wasn't as involved as Erich Traub was. Erich Traub was very involved, and he was overseeing and directing the entire phase of Insel Riems research. So, under Erich Traub, he had a very skilled technician named Anneliese Berger. Anneliese Berger was the technical assistant to Professor Traub at Insel Riems. She, like Erich Traub, had graduated from the University of Gießen and also was contracted for Beringwerk AG, which was the subsidiary of IG Farben. And they were involved in making a lot of animal disease vaccines and, of course, bioweapons, because it was all hidden under vaccine research. And Miss Berger graduated from Gießen University, passing her technical and medical examination with best grade. She was very intelligent, like Traub was, so the two of them together were quite a team. She was later approved to come to work for the Americans, but it doesn't appear that she ever made it over here. Next, we have, so in the leader or the manager of Beringwerk was Albert Demnitz, and so he was associated loosely with Insel Riems. But this is Otto Waldmann. Otto Waldmann. And they had one of the guys who was very involved in the Insel Riems research was a man named Hubert Mollmann. Hubert Mollmann, he was in charge of the serum and vaccine production, and of course biological weapons production. He also ran the slaughterhouse, and he worked with Professor Traub on foot and mouth disease a lot, and of course all of the other disease agents. And I'll tell you what diseases they worked with most. But of course they had a very diverse area of research. So some of the diseases, like for example foot and mouth disease, was the bulk of the Insel Riems work. And foot and mouth disease, the antigens from foot and mouth disease could also be used to weaponize other pathogens. They worked a lot with foot and mouth disease virus. They worked with swine fever or hog cholera, which is also a virus. They also worked on a highly neurotropic virus called Borna disease virus, and that's a virus of horses, but can also at times actually Borna disease can infect pretty much anything. It has such a broad spectrum pathogenicity and is even known to have infected humans. And Borna disease virus was actually used as an animal model to study various kinds of psychiatric abnormalities, and also it was used to study diseases in the autistic spectrum. They also worked with equine infectious anemia virus, which is like the HIV of horses. And I think HIV came from equine infectious anemia. I don't think it was a monkey virus. I think it was this horse virus, and there's considerable evidence to say that it was. And I covered that in the last chapter. But Insel Riems did work with that. They also did considerable amount of work on avian influenza. And of course Newcastle disease virus, which is a form of avian influenza. It was an atypical, Newcastle disease was, they often called it atypical avian influenza, or atypical fowl plague. Back then in Germany, they just called that Geflügelpest. And so atypisch Geflügelpest meant atypical avian influenza. And that was a disease they often worked with. They also worked with porcine encephalomyelitis, or what is called swine polio. And another disease, so there was also the foot and mouth disease, but they had a variant of foot and mouth disease that was neurotropic. And it was a neurotropic mouse-adapted foot and mouth disease, which was then adapted to chicken eggs. And at that point, I'm thinking is when it took to humans, and this became the virus that is today known as Coxsackie virus. And it's neurotropic, it's cardiotropic, means that it takes to the brain and the heart, and to the musculoskeletal system, so myotropic. They also worked with some bacteria. They worked with the Leptospira spirochete, and it appears, of course, that they worked with the Lyme disease spirochete, even though they didn't publish about it. And they did have experiments with ticks and foot and mouth disease in 1938, and it was found that they could harbor foot and mouth disease, but they put little emphasis on it being able to spread that way. But I think that was a big part of the World War II work on Insel Riems was adapting foot and mouth disease to be able to be spread by ticks. And I know Erich Traub worked with brucellosis, which is from the bacteria Brucella, and also there was a bacterial disease of swine that they worked with considerably, and that was called swine erysipelas, and it caused these diamond-shaped rashes, and the antigens were much like those on brucellosis or brucella. And so they spent all sorts of concentration on adapting these animal diseases into human diseases. They had a guest researcher there from Yugoslavia named Zvonimir Dinter, and he became a pretty well-known virologist back in those times. Eventually he went to Sweden, but there's this long passage I included, a quote from him in the book about his time working with Erich Traub on Insel Riems. It's really interesting because he often wrote about his experiences back then, which were invaluable to me when I was writing my book. They're invaluable to me writing my book, and they were all in German. I had to translate them, but one of his papers, called Encounters with Erich Traub, was very descriptive of that back in those times. And he was obviously, this guy was one of Erich Traub's proteges back then. The other one being Werner Schaefer. Werner Schaefer, that's this guy. Werner Schaefer started studying under Erich Traub in 1939, and it was Werner Schaefer who secured the spirochete for Erich Traub that was later used to make Lyme disease. And this was done in 1939, and I show, because he says in that paper, I have to bring it back to my superiors for research and teaching purposes. And his superiors at that time were Erich Traub and Carl Beller. And Carl Beller, by the way, is the one who taught Erich Traub all about the tick-borne diseases and the rickettsia and how the mix of different co-infections together created a really complex and complicated disease. And that's a big deal when we're talking about the evidence linking Erich Traub to these ticks, to these weaponized ticks. And I showed, how Erich Traub got the spirochete in 1939, and it was the spirochete that is the closest relative to Lyme disease, Borrelia anserina. So it was created from a bird Lyme disease. And this guy was the one to grab it. And so he was at Insel Riems with Erich Traub. and he was able to return to West Germany when the Russians captured Insel Riems. And there were only a few people who returned to West Germany. Other people who were at Insel Riems, though, their pathologist, his name was Heinz Rohr. Heinz Rohr, pathologist and animal disease specialist, he worked a lot on that neurotropic mouse-adapted foot and mouth disease with Traub. He ran the pathology department. He had been an alumni at the University of Greifswald, and he weaponized swine pest and continued to concentrate on problems of biological warfare with Professor Traub, configuring the mutation rates for the neurotropic modified foot and mouth disease used for military purposes, and adapted to avian spirochetosis and mycoplasma through the tick program. So that neurotropic mouse-adapted foot and mouth disease was used to weaponize the Lyme spirochete, and of course with mycoplasma. The next one, Insel Riems had an electron microscope department, and it was run by Helmut Ruska. He ran the electron microscope. They got many images of viruses, and they were able to get images of many bacteria. They were able to study in great depth the process of bacteriophages and their lysis of bacteria, or their destruction of bacteria, and or their ability to modify pathogens. So he studied the morphology of bacteriophages. He also looked at mycoplasma, rickettsia, and filterable viruses, and he coordinated with Traub and the biological weapons program. So, and they were also associated with the University of Berlin. And Professor Traub, Erich Traub, was a professor, was given professorship at the University of Berlin, while also at Insel Riems. So, Heinz Rohr, Helmut Ruska. Next on our list is Gottfried Pill. Gottfried Pill, he was the biochemist at Insel Riems. He ran the Insel Riems chemistry department. He had previously worked for IG Farben and Hoechst AG, another company. And his job was the biochemical and chemical synthesis and preparation, purification of antigen, and production of adjuvants. He published several papers with Traub on foot and mouth disease, and they often would isolate the antigens and purify them. And of course, viruses. Many viruses actually operate as an antigen. So there's Pill. And then they had for a short while at Insel Riems a man named Gerhard Schramm. Gerhard Schramm. He was an immunochemist. He was specialist on plant and animal viruses. He is most known for his work on the tobacco mosaic virus. He was also the one who ran the ultracentrifuge. That's the... Well, they all ran them, I think, but he was... Well, anyway, he was from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, which later became the Max Planck Institute. He was on Insel Riems for a time, and he was advising them He was world-renowned for his contributions to virology using the tobacco mosaic virus as a model for study, advised Insel Riems on virological problems in the morphology of bacteriophages, plant disease program, worked with Professor Traub and Werner Schaefer on Newcastle disease and avian influenza. Another guy we have, let's see. The next guy up is, let's see if I can find it. Okay. They had for a time also a man named Gernot Berghold. He was a specialist on insect viruses, and he assisted with the arthropod vector program. He was a lead virologist and entomology department. He was also from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, and he had worked for IG Farben, and he was actually down in Africa with Werner Schaefer in 1939. Werner Schaefer was sent to Africa, East Africa, in 1939, but then he returned by the start of the war, and he went to Insel Riems. And Gernot Berghold was also there for a time, and that's Gernot Berghold, and he actually went to Canada after the war, and then to Venezuela. He was working for the West. Also, when Traub returned, Gernot Berghold was also working for the West at that time. Well, he was on Insel Riems for a little while. And that's all there is for names on Insel Riems. That's pretty much the entirety of it. So these were very valuable scientists, and so Russia, the Soviet Union, had captured Insel Riems after the war, or at the end of the war. They had taken control of Insel Riems. They hauled off all of Erich Traub's most important work. All of the Insel Riems work from the war was hauled off to the Soviet Union, and that is why the Soviet Union gained the lead in biological weapons research, and because they had also acquired the best of the best in Unit 731. That was the Japanese biological weapons program. So having captured those two facilities, they were able to get all of the best of biological weapons research, and that's why they ended up taking the lead, because America at that time was still kind of downplaying the significance of biological warfare. Even though they had started their program, they were way behind the Germans and the Japanese, and so when the Soviet Union acquired all of that research, the Soviet Union took the lead. And we know that while it was under Soviet occupation, Joseph Stalin actually placed the facility under his personal protection. And what we know is that the Soviet bioweaponeer M.P. Chumakov traveled to Insel Riems and met with Traub twice in 1947 to consult with him on chorea meningitis, or LCM virus. And it's interesting that he was consulting him on that, because he would later team up with Albert Sabin. M.P. Chumakov would later team up with Albert Sabin would later team up with M.P. Chumakov, and they would work on the polio shots that would be given to many millions of Americans. But I tried to put my M.P. Chumakov video out on this channel, but YouTube removed it. And so it is available on my Rumble channel, but I can't post it here. It's also available on my Odyssey channel, but I can't post it here. But M.P. Chumakov met with Erich Traub on Insel Riems twice. And then they began weaponizing stuff under Soviet authority. So Erich Traub was under Soviet authority for a time, and he actually was kind of flipped to the Soviets, and then he was, and then he had this kind of fake escape. They knew all about it. They had put him up to it. They were sending him over to the West as a spy. And so there was probably some other people there that were sent over as a spy. But we know Erich Traub was, and that is discussed in my book, all about his confession and everything, and his interrogation by Agent Dan Benjamin. And that is discussed in my book. But they were under Soviet authority, and when Erich Traub escaped and left, Heinz Rohr became its president. Heinz Rohr became the president of Insel Riems, because also Otto Waldman had escaped to Argentina with the help of the Swiss. And then they started to concentrate heavily on that virus, equine infectious anemia virus, which I think eventually became HIV. And there's considerable evidence to support that. I know the French AIDS researcher Luc Monia had compared the HIV virus from an AIDS patient to equine infectious anemia virus, and I think it's closest to that virus, and that virus acts exactly like HIV. And they mixed, I won't get into this area because they'll take my video down, but so they were heavily focused on that horse disease too, and so that's a big deal. That was a big deal, and it was definitely, looks like it was weaponized and became HIV. But that's pretty much the importance of the Insel Riems facility. And of course, if you buy my book, you can read all about it. I go into the entire, history in depth, especially during World War II, after World War II. I talk about its early days, the inception of Insel Riems. And it's just really interesting. It's a great book, I think. I think a lot of people will absolutely love it, especially people who are interested in this area and people who are sick with Lyme disease and similar tick-borne diseases. A lot of them are very passionate about learning more about the diseases and their history. And of course, there's been an aura of mystery around Erich Traub for many years, and this is the first book. This is the very first book that goes into the life of Erich Traub in depth. So I think I will leave it here. I don't know what I'm going to cover next, but I will think of something. And maybe I'll even go over the equine infectious anemia virus. But that's it. And with that said, everybody take care of yourself, be yourself, build yourself, and I will see you on the other side.